At 14:10 hours on June 25, 2026, an IRGC drone strikes the starboard side of the Singapore-flagged container ship Ever Lovely, 7.5 nautical miles southeast of Dahit, Oman.
The bridge windows shatter, but the main engines keep running. The ship's master declines naval escort assistance, issues no distress call, and navigates his 21 crew members forward through one of the world's most contested maritime corridors toward open water. That choice carries enormous strategic weight. Within hours, the International Maritime Organization suspends its evacuation program for 11,000 stranded seafarers still trapped inside the Persian Gulf. U.S. Central Command deploys armed F-16 patrols over the shipping lane, and global Brent crude prices climb 2.1% to $75.26 per barrel. One drone, one independent cargo ship, and an 8-day-old ceasefire suddenly sits at the edge of collapse. The part that reshapes the entire analytical picture. The Ever Lovely was not under UN protection, was not traveling inside any managed convoy lane, and was not following the corridor routes Iran's newly formed Persian Gulf Strait Authority now claims as exclusively its own. To understand why that distinction drives everything that follows, the war's timeline needs context. On February 28, 2026, U.S. and Israeli forces launched approximately 900 airstrikes within 12 hours against Iranian air defenses and military infrastructure, neutralizing Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei and opening what became the 2026 Iran War. Iran's response arrived fast. The Strait of Hormuz closed, sea mines entered the water, and hundreds of commercial vessels found themselves trapped inside the Persian Gulf with no safe exit. The United Nations placed 11,000 seafarers under an emergency evacuation program, working to extract stranded crews from an active naval combat zone. Iran's economy shed an estimated $4.8 billion in oil revenue during the first weeks of the U.S. naval blockade alone. The conflict continued escalating through spring. On June 9th, following the downing of a U.S. Apache helicopter, CENTCOM executed retaliatory strikes against Iranian air defenses, ground control stations, and radar sites on Keshem Island and Sirik. Those strikes removed key IRGC targeting infrastructure, but they did not eliminate the IRGC's distributed coastal drone network, which operates from dispersed forward positions along the strait's northern shore. That detail matters because the weapon that strikes the Ever Lovely on June 25th comes from exactly that kind of decentralized launch architecture, the kind that precision airstrikes on fixed installations cannot fully address. 4 months of sustained military pressure produced a formal outcome. On June 17, 2026, U.S. and Iranian negotiators finalized a preliminary 60-day ceasefire memorandum under Pakistani mediation, with terms that included reopening the Strait of Hormuz to commercial traffic. The results were visible almost immediately. By June 24th, commercial vessel transits through the strait peaked at over 70 in a single day, the highest volume recorded since the conflict began. Maritime insurance underwriters started revising their risk models. The ceasefire looked like it was holding, which made June 25th the worst possible day for what happened next. If you are following this unfolding maritime crisis and want deep analytical breakdowns, subscribe to our channel and hit the notification bell now. The Ever Lovely had spent over 100 days trapped inside the Persian Gulf before attempting its transit. The Taiwan-owned, Singapore-flagged container ship operated independently, outside the UN-managed evacuation framework, following UKMTO-recommended coordinates, the United Kingdom Maritime Trade Operations guidance that commercial masters reference as a baseline in contested waters. That routing placed the vessel outside the corridors Iran's Persian Gulf Strait Authority was treating as exclusively safe, and that divergence became the operational trigger. IRGC coastal drone units distinguish between ships traveling inside Iranian-approved lanes
and ships navigating on international routing guidance, and the Ever Lovely fell into the second category. At 14:10 hours UTC, an IRGC drone strikes the Ever Lovely's starboard superstructure. The blast damages the bridge windows and the ship's eaves. Structurally, the vessel holds. Main engines continue operating. Cargo holds remain intact. All 21 crew members survive without physical harm. What the strike does not do physically, it accomplishes operationally. It signals to every vessel currently navigating the strait that the IRGC enforces a corridor distinction with live weapons, and that signal reaches the entire commercial shipping industry within the hour, through UK MTO alerts, Lloyd's of London risk updates, and IMO maritime safety broadcasts simultaneously. The Ever Lovely's master makes his decision in the immediate aftermath, with shattered bridge windows and 21 crew members depending on a single call. No distress call, no request for naval escort. Engines ahead. Accepting a military escort in a live combat zone introduces escalation variables that an independent transit avoids. An escorted vessel draws a different threat response than an unescorted one. And in a corridor where the rules of engagement remain disputed, that distinction matters. The Maritime and Port Authority of Singapore, MPA, and the ship's operator, Evergreen Marine, later confirm the transit concludes without further incident. The ship reaches open water. The master's refusal of escort assistance removed the vessel from any active engagement scenario, which meant the decision, counterintuitive as it appeared from the outside, aligned with precise tactical reasoning about how IRGC drone units select and prioritize targets. Arsenio Dominguez, Secretary General of the International Maritime Organization, responds within hours of the attack. The IMO suspends its voluntary vessel evacuation program through the Strait of Hormuz entirely, halting the extraction process for the 11,000 seafarers the program had been working to bring out of the Persian Gulf. Dominguez clarified that the attacked vessel was not transiting under the IMO's evacuation framework, announcing a temporary pause in the plan to reconfirm that the necessary safety guarantees continue to be in place for the ships on the evacuation list and all those in the region. Sending additional vessels into that corridor without verified security assurances places more crews inside the same threat envelope. The program stops until the security baseline changes. U.S. Central Command does not wait for diplomatic processes to generate a solution. Within hours of the June 25th attack, CENTCOM deploys armed F-16 fighter jets on active patrol over the Middle East shipping corridor. The F-16's operational value in this context is deterrence through speed and engagement capacity. An airborne platform that can respond to surface threats faster than any surface combatant currently stationed in the region. IRGC coastal drone operations rely on forward launch positions, short engagement windows, and low radar cross-sections. And an armed F-16 on patrol overhead collapses the timing margin that makes those launches effective. The jets do not restore the pre-attack security baseline, but they establish a visible and immediate escalation cost for any follow-on IRGC drone activity along the corridor. The mechanism that makes this strike so strategically disruptive extends beyond military posturing. Iran's Persian Gulf Strait Authority issues a declaration on June 25th, stating that commercial vessels transiting outside Iranian designated routes will receive no safety guarantees. Under the UN Convention on the Law of the Sea, Iran does not hold sovereign authority over the Strait of Hormuz. Transit passage rights for all nations through international straits are legally established and do not require permission from a bordering state. But the PGSA declaration operates as a tolling mechanism in practical terms, asserting Tehran's intent to treat corridor assignment as a lever of political and economic control, regardless of what the ceasefire memorandum says. The legal position and the operational reality now sit in direct conflict, and every commercial shipping operator must decide which one to trust. Iran's parliament speaker, Mohammad Bagher Ghalibaf, sharpens that political position publicly.
Ghalibaf rejects the U.S. assertion that Iran's unfrozen assets must be spent exclusively on American agricultural imports, stating that the only crop Iran harvests is decades of mistrust. That statement arrives the same day as the drone strike and the PGSA declaration, and the synchronization is not accidental. The hardline faction inside Iranian politics treats the ceasefire as a tactical pause rather than a structural resolution, and Ghalibaf's public rejection signals that converting U.S. economic incentives into durable IRGC behavioral change faces a formidable internal political wall. The ceasefire carries a formal signature, but it does not carry unified Iranian institutional buy-in. President Trump responds with a direct warning. The U.S. will reinstate its naval blockade and resume active bombing campaigns if Tehran continues violating maritime security agreements. That threat carries operational weight because the enforcement architecture never fully stood down. CENTCOM's F-16 patrols are already airborne. The naval assets that enforced the original blockade remain in position across the region. Iran lost an estimated $4.8 billion in oil revenue during the initial blockade period, and a return to those conditions requires no new military buildup, only the order to re-engage an infrastructure that remains active and positioned. The threat is credible precisely because it is not hypothetical. Global energy markets register the exchange instantly. Brent crude rises 2.1% to $75.26 per barrel within hours of the June 25th attack. That movement encodes a specific trader calculation. The probability of full strait closure just increased, and any sustained disruption to the roughly 20% of global oil trade that transits the Strait of Hormuz produces considerably higher prices downstream. War risk surcharges from maritime insurers compound that cost further, and shipping companies that had just begun costing out a return to normal lanes now face a second round of rerouting calculations. The Ever Lovely is one vessel, but the pricing response reflects what that vessel represents across an entire interconnected supply chain dependent on one narrow corridor remaining open. The single most arresting figure in the entire sequence is not the crude price movement and not the 11,000 seafarers waiting again for safe passage. On June 24th, over 70 commercial vessels completed transit through the Strait of Hormuz in a single day without incident, the highest volume since the war began, a number that maritime analysts pointed to as proof the ceasefire was working. 24 hours later, one IRGC drone strike on one independent ship brought the entire evacuation architecture to a halt. The margin between the most active transit day since the war began and the day the corridor closed again was exactly 24 hours. The tactical lesson that defense analysts extract from the June 25th sequence is consistent across every assessment. The IRGC strike targets a vessel operating outside the managed corridor architecture. The attack produces no casualties, no structural failure, no cargo loss. Yet, it generates maximum strategic output, IMO suspension, brief market disruption, and a direct challenge to the ceasefire's operational validity in a single afternoon, while the U.S. maintained deconfliction channels rather than executing an immediate military escalation. This is the operating logic of asymmetric maritime pressure in its most efficient form. A drone system launched from a dispersed coastal position does not need to sink a ship to achieve its objective. It needs to demonstrate that the corridor is insecure, and that demonstration reaches every maritime insurer, every shipping board, and every government with vessels currently in transit at the same moment, at a fraction of the cost of any conventional naval engagement. The deeper lesson for the ceasefire's architects is equally precise. A 60-day memorandum signed in Geneva establishes cessation of hostilities between state actors, but it does not resolve the foundational question of who governs the physical corridor.
The PGSA's June 25th declaration makes Tehran's operational answer explicit. Iran intends to treat transit routing as a matter of unilateral authority, ceasefire or not. The gap between that position and the transit passage rights established under international maritime law is wide enough to generate another round of conflict entirely, which is why the next 52 days of the ceasefire now carry more weight than the first 8 combined.
That gap is now the precise measurement of how fragile the ceasefire actually is. And every government, insurer, and ship operator with assets near the Strait of Hormuz is currently doing the same math.